Today in the Valley with Ibrahim Sanya is a two-time Super Bowl champion, first-team All-Pro, and former defensive end of the New York Giants. Today, he leads the NFL's effort to grow the game of football in Africa. Through the Uprise, a talent, training, and scouting program, and the Uprise Flag Football League, where teams owned by NFL players of African descent compete in Nigeria, our guest has been creating opportunities and developing pathways to football college scholarships and the NFL for African players. Today, the Valley welcomes Osi Umenyiora.
This episode is powered by the Global Sports Summit, organized by the Sports Leadership Institute under a private by us for us model. The Global Sports Summit is led by and intended for owners of major sports leagues team, front office executives, and top decision makers in the global sports industry from all around the world. We at Silverbacks Valley are big fans.
Osi, my brother.
Yes, sir.
Great to have you here in Barcelona.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been long overdue. So you're basically the African legend of football.
That's what they say.
It's a fact. That's the reality.
Yes, sir.
So start by telling us about your departure from Nigeria, then to the UK, then to the US.
Okay.
That's a lot of transition for a young man.
Yeah.
How were those experiences?
Interesting. First, my parents are Nigerian. Obviously, we're from the east of Nigeria, Anambra. And so from there, basically, I was born in London, spent the first couple of years of my life in London. Then from there, we went to Nigeria. So I actually got to Nigeria when I was 7 years old. And I spent the next 7 years of my life in Nigeria. Oddly enough, when I first got to Nigeria from England, I would speak with this British Cockney accent. We're in the village in Nigeria. So, they got that out of me really, really quickly. Yeah. And so, but, for us, I was lucky enough or fortunate enough to have a father who, for him, it was all about education. And so he knew instinctively that for us to get a better education or a better life, especially with the things that were going on in Nigeria at the time, we had to leave, and he had the ability to be able to send us out. And so he sent me to the United States for school when I was 14 years old. And I got there. Obviously, I was in Alabama, which was a very interesting part of the United States of America, complete cultural difference between, Nigeria, London, and Alabama. But then, started playing football, saw that that's what all the cool people were doing. And I needed to have some friends. I was quite lonely at the time, and American football was just the biggest sport there. So I picked it up and, got pretty good at it. And the rest is, as they like to say, history.
No. And eventually you joined the Giants.
Yeah.
So tell us about how the opportunity manifested itself.
Yeah.
And was it all you had expected?
Well, I think it was more than I expected, but the opportunity manifested itself in a very. I've been really lucky, is what I would like to say. I think a lot of times people like to pin down hard work and dedication and all those good things, and all those things are necessary. But for me, for whatever reason, I've just always been put in the right place at the exact right time to capitalize on opportunities. I think, for instance, even for me to get a scholarship to go to college, because that's the way it works in America. You go from high school, and then from there you go to college, and then from college you go to the pros. But in high school, I wasn't necessarily a really good football player because I picked up the game very, very late. Most of the people start playing from a young age. I started playing at, I was almost 16 years old when I started playing. And so I only had really 1 year to be able to get a scholarship. So I started playing the game. I wasn't necessarily that good. And so my career was over. Basically, I didn't have no scholarship offers, nothing. And so I was in school, and I was already driving. My sister had taught me how to drive. This is a crazy story. Crazy story. My sister had taught me how to drive already. And so I was already driving to school every day. But I had a class called driver's education. And because I was driving to school like a proper Nigerian, I said, what am I going to driver's education for when I'm already driving? I have my license. So I wasn't going to class in the morning. So I would show up at 9 as opposed to 8. And so after like 2 weeks of doing this, this was after football was over, my high school career. I go to my 9 o'clock class and they're like, yeah, the principal's looking for you. I'm like, oh, what did I do now? So I go to the principal's office and she's like, you haven't been going to your driver's education class, so you're now going to in-school suspension. So I had to go to in-school suspension for 2 weeks. And so I go to in-school suspension, and the person who's teaching the in-school suspension class was a coach on our football team. So he asked me, he's like, Osi, first of all, what are you doing here? You're a nice kid. You shouldn't be in this. I was like, I wasn't going to class. And he was like, okay, so what are you going to do with your life? Like, I don't know. I'm going to find a way to go to college. It's like, I think, you have some potential. You should try to walk on to college, which is, they don't give you a scholarship. You just walk onto a college team and you start playing. He's like, I'm going to call my friend who's coaching at Troy, and I'm going to tell him about you. So he called his friend, and Troy's like 2 hours away. But for some reason, his friend was in Auburn High School at the time, and he was visiting his parents. Wow. So the guy just walked over to where I was in school suspension, and he was like, oh, you're a big kid, man. Like, what's going on? What are you, can you play? I was like, I just started playing this game, but, if you give me an opportunity, something can happen. He was like, okay, cool. So they took me outside, to go run, see how fast I was. He was like, oh, you're fast. So he called the head coach of Troy State. He was like, listen, we got this big kid. He just started playing this game, but he's big and he can run. We should give him a chance. And the head coach was like, cool. So they gave me a scholarship, like right there. Now this took literally, I would say, 3 hours total from when I walked into in-school suspension to having a scholarship to go to school. Just Wonderful. The most bizarre, yeah. And so that's how my actual football career got started, by not going to school. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Just like all rules get exceptions.
Yeah.
And that's usually the time where you get exceptional people.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
So from that getting into college,
yeah,
in a pure luck event,
yeah,
which I think, I do believe that even for luck to catch you, you need to be prepared.
Yeah.
But when you, from college to the Giants,
yeah,
was there another strike of luck of such measure, or the discipline, determination, regularity, not missing practice, that eventually do his job?
Definitely another stroke of luck, to be honest, because I went to Troy, and Troy wasn't like a really big school. It was a smaller school, and so in the NFL, they like to draft players from big schools. And so throughout my entire career at college, I was a good player, but never really got the looks that I was supposed to be getting. And so going up into the last year of my college season, for me, it was all really about education. Like football to me was all about opportunities. It wasn't necessarily, I'm in love with the game of American football, so I'm gonna keep playing. It just kept on presenting opportunities for me. And so I got to my senior year in school, kept on playing, and I had a really good senior year. But I still didn't get the attention of a lot of the big players were getting because I came from a small school. And so I remember I started training for the combine, is what they like to call it. The big combine event, right? And so I had an agent at the time, and so I'm training. He had me at this facility with all the other big players, and then the word came out that I wasn't invited to the combine, which was the big event. Yeah. So I didn't get invited. So they now said, hey, okay, well, listen, we can't keep spending this money on you if you're not going to the combine. So I had to take my stuff, and I went home while everybody's there still training. So I remember going to, I was at my parents' house, and I would go outside, and I'll take a clock, and I was timing myself training and running, and I'll run, and I'll run my 40 time. Then I'll do my drills, all the while holding my clock, timing myself right. And so, all that happened, and then we had this thing called the Pro Day, where teams actually come and they watch you. So I was at my college, and we had a Pro Day. And so the teams came, they watched me. I did really well at my Pro Day, but I still didn't get invited to the combine. So all the projections had me going in like the 6th or 7th round come draft day. And so come draft day, you know how they gather, all the parents and the people gather around. In my head, I'm thinking I'm going to get drafted the next day because it's a 2-day event. And so the first day I told everybody not to be around me because I knew I wasn't going to get drafted on the first day. So I'm laying down, I'm in my pajamas, I'm watching the draft go on. And then all of a sudden, the Giants, it's their turn to pick. It's in like the second round, which is a very early pick. And then the guy comes up and he starts stumbling over a name. And then all of a sudden my agent calls me. He's like, something weird is going on here, man. I think they're going to draft you. And I'm like, how are they going to draft me? It's just no possible way. And then 30 seconds later, they said my name. And I got drafted while I'm in my pajamas watching by myself. It was bizarre. So that's like another thing that got me into playing the game. I wouldn't say it was luck, but there's just strange things that have kept on happening that had got me to that point.
Wow. Clearly, it appears that you were looking for had been looking for you.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Clearly. So, it's a blessing. So clearly that career went well, and you also underwent early retirement.
Yeah.
Before retirement, how was, that meeting with high income?
Yeah.
Because obviously, you evolve with your college mates, and you coming from the continent, and obviously, you had to get your parents over the hump of not taking the traditional expectation of being a doctor, engineer, or banker, or some of the requirements. How was your sentiment with regards to high income? Because obviously they say financial discipline, financial education is often lacking within young athletes.
Yeah.
Was there any guidance, anything that helped you at that moment?
I would say that it all comes down from my parents. And this is another thing that I would say I got lucky in, is because I don't want this to sound any kind of way, but fortunately, growing up, like my father was an Igwe, is what we like to call, so he was a king,
Igwe,
right?
yes,
Exactly.
yes.
Yeah. So we grew up by African standards very, very well.
Okay.
And then from there, he got into a situation like much later on. So when I got to America, there was like nothing, right? So you went from having, pretty much anything you want in Africa, and then you go to the land of milk and honey, and then now you're in the projects and you're straight. It was backwards in a way, right? But then, once I did finally get into the NFL and you start to make, a tremendous amount of money, I think having had growing up, it doesn't make you don't just immediately start going crazy because you've already had that experience growing up. And I think a lot of people and a lot of athletes, for the most part, they say the best athletes come from poverty. And so because of that, if you've never had anything, all of a sudden when you're exposed to that, your first instinct, confusion, you want, and let me go get this, and all the things you've never had, you want to go. Yeah. But I already grew up with all those things. So that was my first instinct, was to get that. And so it was all about also understanding how things were when I was growing up, and then how things were a little bit later on. And there's really nothing worse than having and then not having. Like once you experience that, you say to yourself, you know what, I am never going to go back to not having, right? So you become a little bit smarter and more conscious of the things that you do with money. So once I did have it, I said, I'm never going to be broke again. And so you start to invest and do things in a much smarter way than you would have if you didn't have those experiences.
Fabulous. So obviously you retired.
Yeah.
And there was a thread between that retirement moment and you launching the initiative.
Yeah.
So what was your thinking?
Yeah.
And how did you land into NFL Africa?
So as I was playing, I remember we went to London to play a game when I was still with the Giants at the time, and then we played against the Miami Dolphins in London. And I remember coming out there for the first time. I hadn't been back to London in maybe like 20 years at the time. And so I remember coming out there and, we played the game, and I was looking around and I said, wow, this game is, people know American football in London. It was the first game ever. And so there was like a seed implanted in my head then that, okay, I was born in London. I have a connection to London. I also knew that there were a lot of Africans in London also in that area. And I didn't want to be in a situation where when I retired, I was in America competing for, whatever it is with everybody else. To me, there was fresh opportunity in London. Nobody was really there. But I knew the NFL was heavily invested there, and they were going to continue to make that market grow. But the Americans just weren't on that vibe yet. They were like, well, I'm going to stay in America. I said, no, I'm going to move to London and try to grow the game internationally when I finish. So in 2007, when we played the first game, I started to have conversations with the NFL International about when I retired, I was going to move to London. And they thought I was just joking. This was like 7-8 years before I retired, right? So, but I had made that connection, and I let them know that this is exactly what I wanted to do 7 years prior to me retiring. So upon my retirement, which happened in 2014, I went straight to the NFL office. I was like, listen, I told you 7 years ago that this is what I wanted to do. Now I'm retiring. I want to go to London. I want to help grow the game internationally. And so like a week after I retired, it was like, go. So I flew out there. I was going to the office every day. I'd never been to an office in my life. I was there from 9 to 5 working and just trying to come up with concepts and things to do to grow the game internationally, because they had some ideas, but I was coming with some fresh ideas because I had come straight from the field right into that environment. And I had an international background. I knew the way people thought in different areas of the world. And I knew that they were going to have to expand their thinking in order for these games to grow, because you can't have the American mentality and try to grow the game internationally with the same mentality that you have in America. So I got out there and I saw what they were doing in terms of trying to grow the game in the United Kingdom. And so I came with some ideas about how to grow the game in the UK and Germany and all these different places. At this point in time, Africa wasn't necessarily it wasn't a thought in terms of growing the game, because obviously the financial repercussions or what you could get from Africa in their head, they hadn't started to think about how they can make money as a business in Africa. So it was all about Europe and all these different places. But as time started to go along, what I realized was all the things that we were looking for in all these international markets, Africa already had, right? And it was the place where, there's two types of growth. There's linear growth, there's exponential growth, right, for a business. And you could get linear growth in all these markets because there's so many different so much competition. But for me, the exponential growth could only come from Africa because it had all the ingredients and everything necessary for the game to grow everywhere over there, right? So it was there. I was like, listen, I know you're talking about all these different places, but hey, we already have 100 and something players
in the NFL.
the NFL from Africa, right? From what we've seen, the game requires, size, intelligence, athleticism, something that, sub-Saharan African, West Africans in general is rich on, right? Youth population, the macroeconomic factors are growing. There's so many different things that if you start to plant your seed in Africa now, 10, 15 years from now, it's going to explode for you because you have everything that, everybody else doesn't have. And you have a competitive advantage in the fact that people can actually make it to the highest level from here. Not going to make it from China or India and all these. It's going to be very difficult. But the people in Africa can see with their own eyes players going directly from Africa into the NFL. And that is a massive selling point, right, in terms of consumption and getting people to actually understand and want to follow this game. So started to have this conversation with, the NFL about this. And, luckily for me, I had a very strong relationship with the commissioner of the NFL. So I took the idea straight to him. And I was like, listen, I've been here for a couple of years now. I've seen everything that people are trying to do. there's a massive opportunity here in Africa. You just have to trust me. You have to let me figure out exactly what we need to do. And he was like, okay, Osi, go for it. And this was how the idea for NFL Africa began.
This episode is powered by Afroballers. Afroballers is the largest digital platform curating stories of African athletes, creating values in sports industry on and off the court. Afroballers collaborates frequently with major sports leagues and major sport personalities of African descent. It services an audience of over 100,000 of followers. We at Silverbacks Valley are big fans.
Wow. Now that's marvelous to see how you systematically in your career go from a thought to a belief and then a conviction.
Yes, sir.
And that's what triggers the action.
Yeah.
And that's lovely to watch that consistency now that you got their attention into the geography, especially with the numbers. Right?
Yeah.
They say numbers are stubborn. What has been your execution plan?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where things have been, I would say, just so fantastic. It's been mind blowing to see some of the things that we've been able to do, because a lot of times you say things and everybody looks at you like you're crazy, but they're not working with all the information, right? Like I had the information. I knew that, hey, I started playing this game at a very, very late age, right? And, outside of the quarterback position, it doesn't require that much training, right? Outside of that one position, and there's like 13 positions on the field.
Correct.
So if you have this level of athleticism and this level of intelligence, you can make that transition really, really easy. So I was like, hey, we're going to take players from Africa, Nigeria, Senegal, and next year they're going to be in the NFL. And if I tell you that, you're crazy, but I know that these things are possible because I understand.
And you went through something not too dissimilar.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, we're going to have these camps. And then from there, the first step in the process is we're going to have these camps. We're going to show that this is possible, that we can take these athletes directly from wherever it is in Africa, and we can place them on NFL teams through the International Player Pathway Program. We can take them to the NFL Academy, which is the younger age, or we can send them to college where they get full scholarships to these massive universities. We can do this. And they're like, well, okay, do it. Cool. So we start to have these camps, the uprise camps. And then we find these incredibly talented athletes. And then from there, they go to the NFL Africa camp, which is the once-a-year camp that we have. And then you take these athletes from there, and then we have now 7 players just from 2 years in the NFL.
Wow.
We have a player at the University of Tennessee. We have a player going to Boston College. We have 4 players at the NFL Academy.
Boston College undergrad.
You're Boston College? Yeah.
Amazing.
So one of our players,
is it Eagle?
yeah, he's going there. He's gonna go there this year. He's from Senegal.
Wow.
Yeah, Senegalese player, absolutely. So
amazing.
yeah, found him through Amadou, sent him through us. So yeah,
Small world.
It's crazy. So you got all these things that are happening, and so that's the first initial step.
9 kids in less than 2 years. 13. 13. Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's an amazing yield. Amazing yield.
It's been incredible, and this is just like a small sample of what's possible, because the demand for these type of athletes in the United States of America is insatiable.
Yes.
It's never ending, right?
Yeah.
And then the supply of these type of athletes in Africa is unlimited, right? So basically all it is just a connection of supply to demand. It's basic economics, right? Yeah. And these are the things that we have and that we can continue to provide, because I know that they don't have enough of these kind of people. And just with the sports ecosystem and the way sports are working, that's just going to continue to grow, right? So the more we can continue to provide and train these athletes, the more opportunities they're going to get. And the more opportunities they get, they now go back into their communities, into their countries, and people now start to see. And so it becomes... It's a virtuous cycle. It's a virtuous cycle. Wow. seems elementary when you look at it like that. It seems you're like, why did nobody think to do this before, right? But it's just that's just the way it works.
When you see an empty room, you have to fill it.
Yeah.
A blessing is fully upon you. The other thing we observing is this revolution around flag football.
Yeah.
So tell us how is it playing off on the continent?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think the actual American football itself is it requires a lot of infrastructure. It requires so many coaches and all the equipment and the pads and the field and all these different things,
which is a lot of cost.
Yeah, you're going to incur heavy financial costs if you're going to do it the proper way. But flag football is a very, very easy game to play. It's just flags basically in the football. You can get a small field and then, you start to play the game. But ultimately, we're trying to drive consumption or drive awareness of, the very, very big league, which is where if you're playing flag football, ultimately you're going to be watching the professionals in the NFL, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the play. That's the play there, is to get as many people as possible playing this game with the idea that you're going to be consuming the NFL ultimately. But then you look at the way a lot of teams are trying to do it. A lot of people are trying to do it. For me, it didn't make any sense, because it's not necessarily about just doing flag football, right? Like, especially on the continent of Africa, if you're going to have a sport, if you're going to get people to start to play this game or want to play this game, then there has to be an incentive for them to do that. It's not just, hey, here's some flags in football, go play. They don't need exercise. Like, that's not necessarily what they need, right? Yeah. So we decided to do it a completely different way. I understood that all those 100 and something players that were talked about who were in the NFL already, they always, especially if you're raised by African parents, they have a very, very keen interest in Africa, but they just had no idea how to manifest. They want to be known in Africa. They want their people there to know them. And then you realize that people in Africa don't know. They have no clue about what's going on in American football, the opportunities that this presents, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea for me was, okay, we got to take these players and we have to somehow market them in Africa, right? Mm-hmm. And then we also have to give the people who are playing this game opportunities playing. So now it creates another virtuous cycle of the players who are known in America, well-established players. They now have an opportunity to own teams in Africa, right? Mm. And then also the flag football program that we're doing isn't just flag football. It's an opportunity to see who the most talented players are. And those guys now get the opportunities to go to the NFL Academy in the UK, or the older ones get an opportunity to go to the International Player Pathway Program, where we place them directly into the NFL. And then we also have like a huge cash prize for the winning team. Mm. So this is how you incentivize the players on the ground to actually want to continue to play the game, because number one, there's opportunities for them to win money, and then there's opportunities for them to actually, progress and do some things in their lives. And then you have the players who are in Africa now, the players who are in America now giving back to their communities, owning teams, getting well known, and the game of football itself grows that way. So everybody is winning. Yeah. So that's the way I created it in that way, as opposed to doing it in a way, just flag football, people just go out there and play. No, it doesn't make any sense to me. Everybody has to win.
So should we expect a few flag football teams coming to life?
On
the continent in the coming months, 2 years?
We're running the league right now. So there's 4 of them. They're owned so they're owned by Romeo Okwara, who plays for the Detroit Lions, and Emmanuel Ogba, who plays for the Dolphins, and Njoku, who plays for the Chiefs, and Jones Drew, who plays for the Jaguars. They own these teams, and we're in competition right now.
And they're all based on the continent?
They're all based in Nigeria.
All in Nigeria?
All in Nigeria, because that's my base, right? But then what we're trying to do is we have to find different entrepreneurs in different markets. So we want to go into Senegal and into Ghana and into South Africa and into Kenya and have the same setup in all these different countries. And then, the NFL Africa main camp The teams, the winning team from these different places, we're going to fly them into this NFL Africa main camp, and then they're going to play in like a big tournament there. And then from there, the best players now get the opportunity to
play in the US.
Exactly.
How many flag football teams in the US?
In America? You can't even count them, right? They're everywhere. It's a massive initiative for the NFL to push this flag football globally because they believe people are going to be able to compete everywhere. Like the Mexican team just beat America not too long ago, right? So it's a sport that gives everybody the opportunity, but you're not going to be able to compete in like regular football against an American NFL team. You can't, but flag football you can for sure.
Magnificent. What's your view and your vision for the NFL brand and across the continent? What 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what do you see?
10 years down the road, I see, first of all, there's going to be a actual NFL game played on the continent. I don't know where, but that's going to happen. I believe that within 10 years, if this current momentum is kept up, I don't see a way why the NFL wouldn't be number 2 in terms of the biggest sport in Africa. I don't see a way in which that won't happen as long as they follow my plan for these next 10 years. Soccer is soccer, right? That's going to be there. But I think behind that, if you look at everything that the advantages that the NFL has over pretty much any other sport, especially with the implementation of flag football, I don't see a way in which it won't be ubiquitous across, especially sub-Saharan Africa. Everybody's going to understand the NFL. They're going to be playing the game. They're going to be playing flag football, and they're going to be consuming it without a shadow of a doubt.
Wow, that's ambitious. So we should be warned. We will warn our friends at NBA Africa and also the cricket and the rugby folks.
Cricket and rugby, forget about them. They're done. The only true, I would say, well, not even competition, but the only true, I would say, brother is basketball. That's the only one that's going to be able to stand neck and neck with the NFL. Everybody else is finished.
Super cool. Now, for us, it's music to our ears to know that more capital can get into the continent. Looking at sport is an obvious one that really, with intervention like yours, further demonstrate the validity and the feasibility of the asset class. Because I tell everybody the thing the continent has the most of is not natural resources, human resources. And the physicality of the brothers and sisters is just...
but they don't understand it. It's so weird.
But yeah, I think it just took a bit of time.
Yeah.
But now, over it took a few decades to realize it. But you take baseball, 120 years, basketball, 60 plus, American football, even longer. Wow. I think that the transition happening in all those leagues, first, the decision to go global.
Yeah.
And then when you decide to go outside the US, then you realize the essential aspect of one geography in each of your strategies. Then you have to decide how you get pragmatic about it. So seeing what NBA has done and then you guys, I think it will just open more eyes. But I think the underneath story that's most potent is former athlete like yourself, not just retiring to go into oblivion, but actually coming back with a second win, third win, and say, you know what, I see this that nobody else sees.
Yeah.
Let me make it happen. And now athletes are also getting the right to invest after retirement, but now during their career. And that is just making, an amount of capital that didn't exist before into this international expansion that will only contribute to more velocity.
Yeah. Shout out to the NBA. I have to give them a lot of love and a lot of credit. Amadou Gallo-Fall, a massive inspiration to a lot of the things that I'm doing. He's basically walking in his footsteps, but American football. Shout out to Masai. These are just some real visionary, incredible people who are doing so much good on the continent, man. I will say this, and this is just advice, and I'm going to tell him, I think the one trick that they're missing, that they have to find a way to do, is exactly what we're doing with this. Imagine if a LeBron James or Giannis, imagine if they had ownership in some of these teams that are in Africa.
Yeah.
Like, imagine what that would do.
Open.
Oh, come on, right? Like, you have to find a way to make that connection and make that happen, right? Because if the players themselves are bought in to that, the way they are with what we're doing, the sky is the absolute limit.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the rule has just started changing. Like there was a very specific rule that forbid existing players that's still operational to buy into teams.
Okay.
Because there was some conflict of interest, etc. But I think it's...
I'm talking about in Africa. They can't...
Even Africa, as long as it's affiliated to NBA.
Got you.
But they could buy a team that's not affiliated directly to NBA. But the benefit, I think, for everybody is to be in NFL,
affiliated,
NBA.
Yeah.
But that rule actually is being changed. So they're finding a way to allow those guys to now buy teams in the US, but also teams here. And I think once that window collapse, then what you've achieved will open the gate. I mean, already what we've been able to do, at least in the team we partially own, the Tigers, we were able to get Dwayne Wade's son to come and play for us, and Dwayne and Gabriella came during the tournament. So I think you will probably see over the years to come some of the ball players come into the teams. At least they've managed to get former NBA players to be investors in.
Correct.
So I think what you're saying is like get them to go into a team proper, and that will just expand the. No, that's beautiful. If you had a chance to speak to young Osi, age 16 is when you got to obviously get your scholarship. Let's say 18.
Yeah.
What would you say to young Osi? You had 30 seconds to give him advice.
Just enjoy it. I wouldn't change anything. You know, like there's not one thing I would say that I would change, because I learned so much, right? Like going through all those different processes, and when I look at where I am now, it's just been, it's been almost too good to be true. Like I can't believe it, right? So just enjoy it is what I'll tell them. Enjoy that, enjoy the whole process. So far, it's been incredible.
Amen. A musician has to sing, a painter has to paint, and a drawer has to draw. What is it that Osi needs to do in order to be?
I have to continue to, I don't want to call myself a visionary, right?
You are.
Yeah, but I have to continue to think 5, 10 years ahead, 5, 10 steps ahead, and manifest those things, because as long as you can see it, and it's something that of all people, Conor McGregor said that I took very, very personal. He says if you can see it here and you have the courage to speak it, then it'll happen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
So I have to continue along doing that.
Fabulous quote. We will put it on the show, on repeat.
Yes, sir.
Biggest influence of your life? A person, a book? Tell us if you had to pick one.
Cliche, my father, as a person, it's him, 1,000%. just watching him. Not necessarily, he was a proper African dad, so it wasn't much interaction when we were growing up, but I just saw him and I saw the way he behaved and I saw how, generous and kind and prideful and how upfront and straight and, anti-corrupt. He was a very, very good person. And so for him, it would have to be him. I would say from a professional standpoint, from a player, Michael Strahan, and then now Amadou Gallo for 100%. Like right now, it's Amadou. He's the guy.
Wow.
Yeah, him and Masai, but Amadou. So yeah.
Wow. Who do you got for the next Super Bowl?
Shout out to I would say Philadelphia. Fly, Eagles, fly.
All right. Which country could host the first NFL game in Africa?
Which country could or do I want to? Do I want to? Nigeria. Lagos, Nigeria. But
Lagos.
Which one could? Probably South Africa.
All right. What's your favorite sports movie?
He Got Game.
Favorite football movie?
Kicking and Screaming. If you've seen that, that's a funny movie.
I haven't seen that one. I'm going to have to check that out. Best moment in your NFL career?
Ooh, it's a selfish one, but when I got named All Pro for the first time, that was my favorite. That was the best feeling I would say I've ever had.
Amen. Is there one thing you would have been part of your entire NFL career? Which one would it be?
One team? The Giants. The team
All right.
Yeah. Best team
Home
in the
sweet
world.
home.
Yeah.
NFL African rookie you're looking forward to see on the field in this next season?
I would have to say the Mozzie Smith just got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. I think he's a Nigerian, even though his name doesn't indicate that, but he's a Nigerian.
All right. What's one investment you wish you had made?
Ooh, I wish I would have made an investment, a much earlier investment in Bitcoin and then exited like 5 years ago. No, like 3-4 years ago.
4 years ago. Yeah, there's a bit of FOMO there. What advice can you tell investors about sport business in Africa?
It's the only place I would say that you're going to be able to achieve exponential growth there. I don't think that you can achieve it in any other continent besides there. Obviously, the gamble is probably higher. The risk is a little bit higher, I would say, but the reward from everything that I'm seeing is going to be exponential.
Most inspiring sport business executive. Okay. You've given us a few names.
Yeah.
So I think I'll skip that. Recent sport business story that caught your attention.
Recent sport business story that caught my attention. I would say the formation of NBA Africa as a business entity. Like, I didn't even know that was possible at the time. So that was what really, I was like, oh, okay, so this is what we're doing now, right? And so now we're doing that too. So yeah, that one.
Favorite business book?
Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. Yeah.
Add that to my list.
Yeah.
Favorite personal development book?
Personal development, maybe, I don't know if this is a personal development book, but it's a book called Homo Sapiens.
Sapien by Yuval.
Yeah.
My number one.
Is that a personal development book, would you say?
There's some aspect to it. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
I would recommend it to anyone.
Yeah.
For personal development, knowledge, open one's clarity on life. Favorite podcast, whether sports or business?
Is it a Silverbacks podcast? Yeah, that's the one.
So is there one just for sport that you listen to beside ours?
I don't really listen to a lot of sports podcasts.
But do you listen to other business podcasts besides our own?
The last one that I listened to is like a 4-hour podcast was It was about the formation of LVMH. I don't know
Oh,
if you- have you listened to that one? Crazy. Yeah.
I would argue that it's in my top 5 best podcasts.
Really?
I was discussing that just last night.
That's
That
crazy.
specific
Yeah.
podcast with one member of our board, probably for like 20 minutes.
That's crazy.
I was like, you must
You gotta listen to
that
that.
episode.
Yeah.
That episode just open your eyes and
Yeah.
glance.
Yeah.
Bro, this was amazing.
Yes, sir.
One love.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much.
This
I
was really,
appreciate
really
it.
great.
Yes, sir.
This was fantastic. Keep
Thank
up.
you. Yes, sir.
Fantastic work. This is phenomenal.
Yes, sir.
I think you're gonna rock it. 0 doubt.